Tip 6, use of diagonal lines. Horizontal lines lend a static, calm feel to a picture, while vertical ones often suggest permanence and stability. When strong horizontal or vertical lines appear at or near the center of the photo, they tend to cut the composition right in half. That is rarely successful. To increase interest, introduce drama, and make things appear more uncertain, use diagonal lines. They add excitement. This technique is called the Dutch tilt. In this photo, we see a Pennsylvania Dutch Quaker tilling a field with the camera in a Dutch tilt. Was this created by the Dutch? The first famous use of this technique came to us through the camera work of a Polish movie maker around 1917 who fled to Russia to escape the advancing German army. His name was David Kaufman, but I'll use the name he gave himself, Dziga Vertov. It loosely means spinning top in the Ukrainian language. Vertov tilted the camera in his movies to achieve an altered reality. Because he was multilingual and used many German actors in his film, his technique was called Winkel Deutsch, or German angle. This angered him, so he made sure the technique was called Dutch tilt, and it was spoken in English. In fact, the technique has nothing to do with Holland or the Dutch people, despite the fact that they often claim otherwise. Many filmmakers use this technique a lot. You see it a lot in Twilight Zone episodes. And especially after Vertov's film, Man with a Movie Camera, became wildly popular in 1929, others adopted it. That film has been voted as the 9th best film ever made by members of the Film Academy. Here again is a pioneer of composition whose name is unknown, Dziga Vertov. It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? To accomplish this technique, you'll need nothing more than to tilt the camera to one side or another. This approach can make a static scene into an exciting one. It is particularly useful to add a sense of movement to a static object or heighten the mood of a person with a visual expression. A little bit goes a long ways, so don't go overboard with this. The Dutch tilt rarely works well for wide landscapes because we know the horizon should be level. When we see trees growing off-kilter or rivers flowing uphill, it makes us question the photo. It looks phony. I recommend that you search out subjects with naturally occurring diagonal lines and work with them. A lot of diagonal lines can be found in architecture, details, patterns in nature, and sports subjects. Also look for objects and subjects where a Dutch tilt will improve the image. Every time you go shooting, you should come home with several shots that include strong diagonal lines and occasional Dutch tilts. Tip 7 is leaving space to move. Now, even though many photographs are a static recording of a moving subject, that doesn't mean your shots have to look static. Panning, tracking, and slow shutter speeds all deliver strong impressions of movement. When we combine these effects with a Dutch tilt, our subject can look like it's going really fast. This feeling of free and fast movement can be undone if the moving subject doesn't have anywhere to go in the frame. If a runner with their nose right up against the frame doesn't have anywhere to go, it's very disturbing. Please avoid this by leaving more space in front of a moving subject than behind it. This technique is called leading the subject. Good wildlife and sports photographers are expert at predicting where a moving subject is going and composing their shots appropriately. In a classic portraiture, this technique is also important. The general rule is to have more space given to the direction of the model's gaze. These examples show how even a slight adjustment can make or dispel a sense of tension. Tip 8 is backgrounds. Don't just concentrate on your subject. Look at what's happening in the background too. This ties in with the goal of simplifying your images. A perfectly chosen subject can be ruined with a busy background. Now, you can't always control what's in your background, but you can make it softer by using a long focal length lens and a large aperture. This next point is critically important in controlling the focus of your backgrounds. You see, when you look through your camera, you're seeing the scene at the widest possible aperture that your lens is capable of. Even if you have the f-stop set at f16, you'll be looking at your scene through its widest aperture, which is f2.8 or whatever your lens allows. Now, this is so the image you're viewing will be bright and your autofocus can operate at a high efficiency. But when you press the shutter, the aperture closes down to the opening that you have selected and the shot is taken. Now, the only way to tell how the background looks is to review the photo on your LCD. If the background is too sharp, you need to immediately choose a larger aperture to soften the background. Remember, smaller f numbers achieve larger apertures, and larger apertures limit the depth of field and soften the background. f3.5 softens the background more than f11 or f16. Generally speaking, a soft background is preferred when you want better separation from your subject from the background, as in portraiture, sports, and wildlife. Photojournalists prefer more detailed background because it's important for them to convey a sense of place, so viewers get the idea of where the shots were taken. This makes the job of being a good photojournalist very difficult because they must work with background elements in a clever and artistic way. Tip 9. Being creative with colors. Now, bright primary colors like red, blue, and green attract a lot of attention, especially when they're contrasted against a complementary hue. A red rose against a blue sky is an obvious example, but there are other ways to make color imaging dramatic. I like to use a little splash of color against an almost monochromatic background. This is dramatic because we aren't being overwhelmed by competing colors. These shots are difficult to find in nature, but are easy to set up or find in the city. Choose a bright colored object and place it against a plain colored wall, and you've really got something. A popular technique that people like to do is to take a color photo and turn it into a monochromatic image, except for a single element. This is easy to do in Photoshop. We're now seeing news photos on TV rendered in this way. It's a clever way to make a single subject stand out from a busy background. Shooting a dramatic color image requires a different mindset than constructing bold compositions in black and white. Controlling the eye of the viewer is more difficult because typical scenes have lots of color in them. Being creative with color requires simplifying your images and controlling your depth of field. Tip 10 is breaking the rules. Photo composition is very much like talking or writing. Using the same exact words in a different sequence creates a very different message. Deleting just a few elements can make a huge difference. The sentence, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times," is the beginning of the famous Dickens novel Tale of Two Cities. What if he had written, "It was the best of times," period? We would perceive the message to be about a happy time with drinking, fancy clothes, dancing, and wonderful sex. But having a few more words of a contrasting nature conveys a far more different mood. Now, you're in charge of the message that your photos convey. If you just lift your camera up and take a snapshot without considering your composition, depth of field, color, or a host of other elements, your photos will read like a boring sentence. It was a time, period. That's a bad photo, and you'll fail. To achieve a super dramatic photo, you must push the envelope. This means using some of the previously discussed rules to their greatest advantage or breaking them entirely. Having a person facing out of the frame may achieve the tension that you want, or placing an odd object growing out of someone's head may be just the thing you need to make a humorous image. Using odd colors may make a scene look dangerous instead of inviting, or vice versa. Combining elements that wouldn't normally be in the same scene is called juxtaposition. There are absolutely no rules for this approach except to be outrageous when it suits you. For every rule, there is a reason to break it. And by doing so, you're following another rule. breaking the rules. I strongly suggest that you work with your scene. When you first choose a scene, take the conventional shots first and then start applying the different techniques that we've discussed. You can just put them on little filing cards and keep them in your pocket to remind you. Tilt the camera down, slow down the shutter, make the background too sharp or too soft, or include more sky than you need. There are many ways to break the rules of composition to create new ways to see things. Our assignment for this week is challenging. We're going to produce 10 photos with each one showcasing one of the 10 tips I've covered. Now, you won't have to go far to accomplish this assignment. You can just do it around your house or on your street. You will be most successful when you simplify your images by avoiding clutter. Use a flashlight to assist you in creating more interest in a subject that you want to be the focal point. Have the light strike the subject from the side, not from the camera angle. So we need 10 good shots.
Ay, mi mamacita. Nah, no es flaca, es solamente alta. Ándale, chula.
Good luck.